Okay, next lesson. We're going to go back and use our awesome knowledge of ratio tables to figure out what to do with them. It's very easy to use a ratio table to keep your data organized and to say, okay, well, if I have this independent variable and this dependent variable, I can keep them organized in a table, in a ratio table. And we've talked about that a couple of times at least. So we're going to take it a step further this time. And we're going to take our information, our data from a ratio table, and actually put it on a coordinate graph. Now, for this lesson, we're going to keep everything positive. Okay, we're not going to go into the negatives. We're not going to go into the full 4 quadrants. In fact, if you look at your screen, we only have the first quadrant. You'll notice that the x-axis is on the bottom and the y-axis is going up and down, but neither one of those go into the negatives. So we're only looking at quadrant 1 this time. Okay, I'm going to go back to an old familiar problem. This is my party where I'm trying to get my friends to come to my party, and I want to know how many hot dogs I can get for them. And every friend is going to get 3 hot dogs. Okay, do you remember that? Okay, so I have a table down there. I already have a data table, a ratio table, where I have the number of friends as my independent variable and the number of hot dogs I buy as my dependent variable. Because how many hot dogs I run out into the store and buy depends on how many people are actually going to show up, right? So I have the number of friends as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So that's how many friends I'm going to just use for this exercise. And then underneath that, I have the dependent variable, which for each number of friends that shows up, I'm going to multiply that by 3. So for instance, if only one person shows up, well, I only need 3 hot dogs. If 2 people show up, 6 hot dogs. 3 people show up, 9 hot dogs. And you can see the so on in that table. So what I want you to recognize right off the bat is when I look at the independent and dependent variable in a column, okay, just in the column, let's look at this first column where if only one friend shows up, that's 3 hot dogs, okay? That information right there, those 2 numbers right there are actually the information I need to come up with a coordinate point, okay? The independent variable is almost always x. And the dependent variable is almost always y, all right? And that's actually going to come in handy when we start labeling axes, the x and y axis. So you could actually say, and I don't know if I have enough room to actually put this on here, but this x-axis, if I wanted to give it an actual label, I would say the number of friends. Okay, so any one of those numbers on that x-axis represents the number of friends that I want coming to my party. Okay, or that should be coming to my party. Now, let me scoot this a little bit because I also want to be able to put over here somewhere that the y-axis represents the number of hot dogs. We'll see if I can make this fit. It's not going to look pretty. Next time I'll make it prettier. But you can see that the information on the y-axis, which if I could, I can't on this program, it's too bad. I would probably actually turn that sideways so that it's reading up and down the axis. And I'll show you an example of that in future lessons. But basically, this is my graph. And each one of those pieces of information, number of friends and number of hot dogs, is a coordinate point. So what I'm going to do up here is I'm going to go ahead and list those coordinate points. The first one is 1 friend, 3 hot dogs. See how that works? That's pretty cool, huh? So what's the next coordinate point? If you look at the next column, it says 2 and 6. That's 2 friends. Whoops, forgot my parentheses. 2 friends, 6 hot dogs. And so on. I'm going to go ahead and list them all. 3 friends, 9 hot dogs. 4 friends, 12 hot dogs. And the last one, 5 friends, 15 hot dogs. So now I have 5 points that I can actually play with, all right? And I'm going to use my favorite stars again. All right, let's go ahead and plot that first point. First of all, let's start with a starting point. How many hot dogs do I have to buy if nobody shows up? I mean, I could eat 3, but for the purposes of this exercise, if nobody shows up, I don't buy any hot dogs. I'm going to use that as a starting point, okay? because that's kind of important. That's 0, 0. Nobody shows up, no hot dogs. All right. Now, let's look at how we're going to point the other ones. The next one says 1, 3. One person, 3 hot dogs. So that means down here on the x-axis, I have one friend. And if one person shows up, that means I'm going to buy 3 hot dogs. There we go. Okay. Now, if 2 people show up, I start at 2 friends and I go up to 6 and I put a point for that. Okay. How many of 3 people? 3 people show up. Way up here, that's 9 hot dogs. If 4 people show up, way up here, that's 12 hot dogs. And the last one, if 5 people show up to this party, I'm going to buy 15 hot dogs. Now look at those stars for a minute. Anything you notice? This is going to be it's going to be very important later on when we start talking about graphing our equations. Okay. But for now, just recognize that when I had an independent variable that went up a steady amount and a dependent variable that was also the rule was true for all of the independent variables, I'm always going to get all of my points in a nice straight line. Okay. So I could actually connect all these dots right here, all these stars, and you'll see that they represent a straight line. It's not perfect because I didn't put the line in the perfect place and my stars are a little off balance, a little off axis. But basically what I'm trying to show you is that when you have a situation like this, you have a ratio table that follows a certain rule. In this case, the rule is 3 hot dogs per friend, right? You're going to see a graph that lines up all of the points in a nice straight line. We call this a linear relationship. And again, we'll talk more about that later when we get into the equations lesson, into the equations unit. But what I would like you to do right now is take a little bit of time and reflect on what we just did, okay? And then I want you to open up the link underneath this where you get to practice not only filling in ratio tables based on problems, but also practice graphing those, okay? Now, I had this graph already scaled for you, and I scaled it by ones. You can see the x-axis is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I just counted by ones, and the y-axis is also the same. But what if I had a much more squeezed together graph and I didn't have enough room to put all those numbers? That's when you need to figure out what am I going to count by that makes sense, okay? So think about that as you're doing the exercises. And there is no exercise review video, but all of the exercise problems have answer keys, and there's a lot of them, guys. So take some time to really feel comfortable with this. And I'll see you in the next lesson where we take this all to the next step. Good luck with that. Enjoy it. I'll see you in a bit.